my ghouls and goblins. Welcome back to By Book and Bone. Or if you're new here, welcome. Take a seat and get comfortable. My upload schedule is non existent, I know, but don't worry. I'll keep producing videos, and if you want to keep up to date, you can always tap the notification bell or follow me on Instagram. I post regularly there. You might notice that there's no cozy fireplace today, and well, that's for good reason. I think the coziest place in my house over the past few weeks would be my fridge. I'm not dealing well with the heat. I mean, Ireland in general isn't dealing well with the heat, so instead, please enjoy the sounds of summer while I desperately wait for the autumn weather. Since it's been a while, I thought what better way to get started than a catch up video. In no particular order, I'm going to go through the books that I've read over the summer. The list will be in the description, so feel free to jump around to the parts you're most interested in. Without further ado, so the first book that I'm going to talk about that I read during the summer so far is The Animals at Lockwood Manor. I finished this quite recently and I listened to the audiobook. This is one of my favourite reads of the summer so far. It's that gothic fiction that I love. And it was a surprise sapphic romance involved as well. It's very much my aesthetic. It's, big old manor, and it was full of taxidermy and animals. They were saved from a museum in London during the Second World War. The war didn't have a huge impact on the story, and it's one of those really slow build stories that's more about the characters and their psychological problems in this like big empty creepy house. There's some like events that happen throughout to kind of up the atmosphere. I have seen some people say that the book is way too slow and they didn't enjoy reading it as much, and I think that's where the audiobook is superior maybe, because I listen to it at work like I do a lot of my audiobooks when I'm doing data entry or anything like that, or going over stuff. It was so atmospheric, and it was really nice. It kind of had almost this ASMR vibe, but a little bit creepier. So I really enjoyed it, and I do recommend it, especially if you like gothic fiction and if you want to read more sapphic characters. Some of the images here are from the Dead Zoo in Dublin. It's my favourite museum. I wanted to read Stephen King's The Mist for years. I was looking for this copy for the longest time. It just there was no local bookshop I could find it in, even when I sometimes was away, like in the big city. I'd look in bookshops as well for The Mist, and it just wasn't there. It was all everything Stephen King has ever written but The Mist. And eventually I broke down and ordered it online. Then I was able to choose the exact cover I wanted, so I chose this edition. I was delighted that I really loved it because I did watch the TV show. I haven't watched the movie. The TV show is pretty good, but it just doesn't have as much cosmic horror as you'd kind of want, because that's what The Mist is. After all, it is a Lovecraftian sort of novella, and I really loved it. Unfortunately, it does have that thing that Stephen King constantly, like, I swear, I think every book of Stephen King's has it, where he has to have a section that's either very men writing women or is just men objectifying women. You know what I mean? Like in this one, there wasn't that much. It was like a page where it's like, oh, and we're stuck in this grocery shop, and oh, there's these monsters outside, and my little boy could die, and it's really stressful. Hang on while I just have sex with someone who isn't my wife behind the cabbages. Like, I don't know why that had to be there. And I think that's just part of Stephen King. Wranglestone was actually one of the audiobooks I got for Pride. So it wasn't on my Pride TBR. It was just one I randomly came across, and it ended up being, I think, my favorite, or one of my favorites out of two during June. So Wranglestone is very like, think Warm Bodies but gayer. It has my kind of favorite gay representation and stuff, where it isn't all about the fact that they're gay. It's a zombie story, and it's about like romance, and they happen to be gay, which and then there wasn't like that. There was a little bit, I think, of not quite homophobia, but definitely a little bit like misogyny or like toxic masculinity in the story, but not much. That wasn't the focus of it. It's well written. I love the atmosphere of Wranglestone. It's like, as I said, it's kind of like Warm Bodies, but in Warm Bodies, it's like Warm Bodies is very urban based, whereas Wranglestone is it's basically based. I think it's like outside Yellowstone National Park, but close by, if you know what I mean. And there's a mystery involved. And again, anyway, I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking out for the sequel, Timberdark. This was definitely a fan read for me. Just little fangirling over good old Firefly. Cancelled too early, but never forgotten. I only found out recently that there was an entire second season, but in novel form of Firefly. So I was like, okay, I'll get the first book and see if it's worth continuing. Like, is it a good continuation? Because it could have just been a cash grab or a you know crappy read and just and I know there are graphic novels as well, but I haven't come across them yet, or at least I can't come across volume one of any of the graphic novels, so I'm going with the novelizations first. And I was delighted that I really enjoyed it. There is kind of teething problems with Big Damn Hero because there's just so many. Do you know member berries from South Park? There is so many like sentences, especially early in Big Damn Hero, that give you such member berry vibes for the like member this scene, member Jane's hat, I remember. It was just dumb. I was like, can you just, it'd be constantly like, oh Mal, and he thought back to that one time, that it's just like a scene from the TV show, and I was like, look, you don't need to do that. like you don't need to do that. We know, even if like all I can think is that it's just like a nostalgia bait for fans, and it's like just total nostalgia bait for fans, but also it's just weird if you never watched the TV show, and it's just like this weird kind of, oh, the time that this thing you never heard about happened and you've no idea what they're referencing. But I hope to kind of see that less in the second book, that they won't be doing that anymore. I'm also kind of hoping they sort out and decide whether or not they're going to actually write people's accents, because writing the dialogue for Badger is just kind of teeth gratingly bad. Like, the idea of his dialogue isn't that bad. It's just like some sentences he says he has his like full on Cockney accent, and then some sentences it doesn't. It's like, well, he either says have or av, like decide. So I hope that's sorted out by book two. Within the Sanctuary of Wings is the final book out of the Lady Trent memoir series. So the first book is A Natural History of Dragons. I think this is probably the first non-duology trilogy book series I've finished in years. Like literal years. I'm so bad at finishing series. Even like TV shows, I get to like episode 9 out of 10 episodes, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch the last one. I think I get too stressed, or it like gets really bad, and I'm just like, oh, this is terrible. Whereas with Lady Trent's memoirs have just been, it's just such a great series. Like, if you like that kind of Victorian natural history sort of vibe, they're a great series. The natural, and I loved to see, like, in the final book, you really get to see how Isabella has grown. In the first book, she's really demure and downtrodden by, like, because women at the time weren't allowed to be naturalists and stuff. And it's like her basically having like male allies, essentially, that would, even her male allies at the time were like, oh, oh, well, like, okay, we'll bring you, but you gotta stay inside and like do the secretarial work, and you can't actually look at the dragons and all this kind of crap. But then, like, you see, like, by within the Sanctuary of Wings, she just does not give a shit anymore. She's like, I am the expert, and I am sick and tired of letting my discoveries to be presided over by men, and for them to use it to be like, oh, I actually found this, or to give men credit where she did something. And that was fantastic to see. But then the actual story itself was also really great. I thought it was a really good conclusion to the series. It kind of left you really kind of wanting more, but also a satisfying end, which I think is kind of the best way for series to end. Also, like, if you like illustrations and that, they're like every chapter, a few chapters, there's like what's supposed to be the original hand drawn illustrations from Lady Trent's original notebooks in the field. It's just some of them there, and I think they're fantastic. And I love the covers. I love the story. I just love everything about the series. Another book from my Pride reads was The Insane God. This was one of the books on my TBR. It is another cosmic horror. That's a bit of a trend. I kind of love the old cosmic horror. And the main character is a trans girl who, in the beginning, is suffering from schizophrenia. Like I was kind of like a bit worried about how it was going to be handled, but Jay Hartlove did a fantastic job at both. Was really sensitive to both aspects. Also, managed to give the main character a character, like she had a personality outside both of those things as well. Like obviously have been having suffering from schizophrenia for most of her life, and also having transitioned or socially transitioned quite young. It was really interesting that you saw from her point of view, she was kind of like she just transitioned and everybody was fine about it because she was in an institution. But then from her brother's side, how hard he had to struggle to get the doctors to allow her to transition, to allow her to and like to accept that her transition wasn't a part of her schizophrenia, like that this was a separate thing, and for instead, like, you know, they fought against it and stuff. So it was really interesting, like in that aspect. And then the story was pretty good when it came to the cosmic horror, but it wasn't amazing. I think I gave it a 4 to 5. Like it's 3.5, I'd say, out of 5. The Insane God. It's an ARC copy, so I was given a copy in exchange for a fair review. It's definitely worth reading. I would say that if you haven't read a lot of cosmic horror, it's a good book. Like I have read quite a bit, so I was not bored by, like it wasn't, you know, by any means, but it was just kind of like, yeah, you know, I've kind of seen some of this before. But what its real strength was the two main characters. I really liked both of them for different reasons, and the difference between how they had to deal with life. Manhunt, a very controversial book, probably the most controversial book I've read since I started my Bookstagram, and definitely since I've started my BookTube. I think Manhunt deserves its own full video, so I'm not going to go too much into it. I gave Manhunt 3 out of 5 stars, which I think is really fair. There were aspects that I really loved, like the concept I thought was brilliant. But I think Gretchen Felker Martin did try to do too much in one book. But I have to say, I think the controversy over this book is kind of ridiculous. Like if you hate the book Manhunt, you've read it, you hate it, no problem. There was lots of negative reviews. There's lots of people who don't like it, but they've read the book and they have, like, you know, genuine reasons, and that's I've obviously have no issue with that. It's just that there was a lot of hate brigading, and then there was love brigading, and you know, and I was just like, just read the book and give an honest review of it. Like I can't stand, and it doesn't matter. Like it could be Mein Kampf, and I think you shouldn't review it if you haven't read it. You know, the Outrage is the second Pride read that I really loved. I listened to the audiobook. It was another one that wasn't on my TBR, but I just came across it. And I feel so, like, I love my local library because they have such good recommendations. Because for some reason, I would never have come across the Outrage except for my local library putting it to the forefront for Pride Month. I really loved it. I saw some people liken it to an LGBTQ version of The Handmaid's Tale. I do have to disagree with that a little bit because I think The Handmaid's Tale and The Outrage kind of cover different things. I would actually say that The Outrage is more like a mix between 1984 and V for Vendetta, but like YA. So it actually really reminds me of V for Vendetta if we were following the characters in the backgrounds, like that girl with the glasses, or Stephen Fry's character who was killed because he was gay. Oh no, yeah, he was killed because he was gay, but he was arrested originally for making fun of the. Anyway, getting off track. The Outrage, it has two times, so it kind of follows like now and 6 months ago, and I found the 6 months ago that every second chapter was the 6 months ago. And after the first few chapters of the 6 months ago, when their romance began, I just didn't like that bit anymore. I was like, okay, we get it. Their romance began. Like, I don't think it needed as much of like the background of like 6 months ago. A few chapters of it would have done. The main bulk of the story and the world building is actually done in the present. I really liked it. I liked that. So instead of just focusing on more vague social like social reactions to the LGBTQ, called degenerates in the proletariat. I can't remember what the name of the Big Brother group, the party. They call like basically anybody they don't like degenerates, and that includes like anybody on the queer spectrum and like genderqueer people, and I think as well genetically disabled people. They seem to be fine, like not fine, but they won't arrest and destroy people who became disabled due to an accident. But there was some mention of like no genetic disability. It was gross. Just great, it is set up as a really pretty gross time. But the characters and their story really focuses on the importance of media. So the importance of movies and books, mostly movies, but it does mention books somewhat, and like films and TV shows, on how important like representation is. And I thought that was really good. There was one scene that was a bit cringy where I was like, like I thought they were laying it out too obviously, and I was like, okay, like chill. But it is a young adult. Other than that, though, like it is a great story and a struggle worth reading about. So I have another Stephen King book here. Unfortunately, this one was a bit disappointing. I think I don't know, like it's a newer book. I think it's like 2014 or something. And I think King's editors need to grow some more balls and be like, hey, there's like 200 extra pages here that aren't needed. The ending, the last like 60 pages are brilliant. And especially, it has a bit of cosmic horror in it, but it's an existential horror about like death and people's fear of death. So if you're not afraid of like death or anything like that, this book probably won't be frightening to you. But it was genuinely, the last 60 pages was something that really stuck with me. And it's just unfortunate that so much of the book is just nothing. It's just boring people doing boring daily shit. Like, and I can't recommend it because of that. But at the same time, those last 60 pages blew me away. Dolly Considine's Hotel is I think the last book I read that was on my Pride TBR. I got an advanced copy from a bookseller in Dublin, and it's an Irish book. And I really wish that I could say that I adored this book. I loved Eamon Summers' writing is brilliant. Like I loved his writing. I loved reading like how he phrased things, how he built things, but the actual story in the book drove me mad. It like I don't know why, but my copy seems to have an extra 200 pages that aren't listed on Goodreads. Like the Goodreads says it's like 300 pages, and it definitely was more like 500 pages. It has a lot of nothing. Like it takes place in Dublin at the time of the original, or one of the original abortion referendums in Ireland, I think in 1983. I have some pictures from the archive just to show kind of what that was like. It's a really divisive time, and I thought this, like, this would be a really difficult read because of the recent, I think it was 2018 referendum to undo that original referendum because of sheer damage that that addition to the Constitution had to women. So I thought this would be a lot more difficult to read, but it kind of doesn't focus on that. That's the setting, but I found that Summers didn't really do anything with that setting, which was really disappointing. And it's more like the hotel is just a gossipy hotel, but in a kind of really dreary way. It was unfortunate because I did like Dolly herself. I could not stand Julian, who's the main character. Most of it is through his point of view. He likes to see himself as a writer, and I could not stand him. He was just the worst. I hated him so much, and I was like, oh god, like I don't care what happens to you. And there isn't really like an overarching storyline. It's just, and it is a summer of unrequited love, supposedly, and it's just Julian It's like if I just told you word for word one of my summers when I was in my late teens working at a bar. Like, it's no more interesting than that, and it's just set during a time that could have been more interesting. The Wind in the Willows is a childhood classic. I did not read it until this year. I had seen the Disney version and loved it. I used to watch it over and over when I was a kid. Can't remember much of it, but I saw a lovely secondhand copy for a few euro when I was visiting in Cork, and I picked it up and I was so excited because I love like Beatrix Potter. I love books about animals and waistcoats. Like I love shit like that. So I was really excited for it. But and it's not bad. Like the parts with Badger and Molly are fantastic. So the book is actually really chop and changey. Like there is an overarching storyline that it goes back to that's just Toad's story, but then in between Toad's overarching story is small stories, like small one-off stories with Badger, Mole, and Water Rat. And I loved those bits. The one-off little stories I loved, but actually, like Toad is the bloody worst, and I just wish he just, I don't know, stayed in prison, and that was the end of his story. Like he deserved it, and he should have stayed there. You know, I did not want him to get like he just, and I was so annoyed when we went back to him, and then it ended with him, and I was like, we could have just had each chapter being another little story of Mole and Water Rat's life, maybe with Badger and the mice and a few others in. It would have been an amazing book that I would be recommending to everyone. But as it is, it's kind of it's like the book couldn't decide what it actually wanted to be. And it's still, I think, worth the read if you like classics. But if you're not into classics, then I would give it a miss. So the final book I'm going to talk about for this lovely catch up is How to Train Your Dragon. It's okay. It's fine. I think I gave it 4 stars. Like it's fine. It's good. Like I gave it 4 stars. It is good. It's just that the movie is better. Like that's such a rare thing to say, but the books are kind of cute, and I could see that if I'd read them when I was a kid, it'd be one of those ones that you like kind of have to read as a kid for it to be like your favorite series of all time. I did really like how they did the Viking characters in the book, but the dragons weren't my favorite. Like this is Toothless in the book compared to him in the movie. You, like, you know, there's that, and he's also like a little prick in the book. All the dragons are kind of not nice and stuff. There was a funny thing with the How to Train Your Dragon book that's included in the book. Like it's the textbook within the fiction book. And that was a funny scene. Like that was pretty funny. But other than that, like if you've seen the movie, there's kind of no point in going back and reading the books, which is unfortunate. And there you have it. Now, to be honest, it took me quite a while to actually make this video, so I have read a couple more books since. But this is relatively up to date. And again, if you want to keep more up to date or talk to me about books or get recommendations, I do post much more regularly on my Instagram and by Book and Bone there as well. And I'm quite active and I like to talk to people. I'm thinking about my next video, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to try and write a review and have a discussion of Manhunt. There's more books that I want to talk about than time. I wanted to read Camilla for a long time, and I've just gotten a hardback copy, and I'm thinking that I might also do a audiobook version, just maybe of the first chapter, like I've been doing my poetry readings, and Carmilla could be my first actual audiobook. So if you're interested in that, please do let me know. Thank you for watching. See you soon.